Welcome to the MLM Solution Podcast Show, where you'll learn the facts and hear the truth about the network marketing industry. Here's your hosts, Rob Coody and Marie Cannon.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the MLM Solution Podcast. I am Marie Cannon, and as you notice, I am flying solo once again today. It is Monday, September 27th, 2021. We're just a skosh after 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and I'm excited to be here with you. As you may know, if you follow this podcast at all, Monday happens to be my favorite day of the week because it's kind of the start of the week. It's when everything gets going. I know a lot of people, Monday's the worst, and everybody loves the weekends, and Friday and Saturday gets all the love, but I'm kind of a big fan of Mondays. So we're going to hang out here. We are on podcast episode number 258. Today, we are going to be talking about the gift of good enough. But before we go there, please make sure you visit our website, themlmsolution.net. That's themlmsolution.net. You can find all of our previous podcast episode links there. You can find all the products we have available for you, training materials, all sorts of good stuff stacked up on that website. And it is also a great way for you to communicate with us. There is a little contact us link there. If you ever have any comments, questions, suggestions for future shows, you can certainly contact us there. And then, of course, if you're looking for us, you can find us across the social media platforms using hashtag #TheMLMSolution. That's hashtag #TheMLMSolution. And while you're out there in social media land, if you would please like, share, comment on our various social media platforms, we'd really appreciate that. We love the feedback. Again, it also gives us the opportunity to reach more folks with our information. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, register for notifications by clicking on that little bell twice. That will let you know when we're going live, and you can join us if you're available. Otherwise, it will also notify you when we upload new content. And then, of course, during the show, if you'll please give us a thumbs up. If you like what you hear, you understand the points we're making, we appreciate that interactive feedback as well. Feel free to comment. We try to get to those on the show if we can. That's not always possible, but if we can't respond on the show, we do make sure to respond at some point as soon as we can. And quite honestly, sometimes the questions for clarification or just other inquiries drive what some of our podcast topics are. So that is that. And as I mentioned, we are on podcast number 258, The Gift of Good Enough. And today, be sure to stick around to the end, because once I kind of get through the topic of today's podcast, I have a very important announcement that I want to share with you. So stick around. You don't want to miss out on that. Now, you may be wondering, the gift of good enough, what is that, and what does that have to do with MLM, the network marketing industry? Well, the gift of good enough is kind of one of those softer topics, I guess. It doesn't apply specifically to multi-level marketing, network marketing. It kind of applies to life in general. And part of the reason I wanted to touch on this topic today is that it kind of goes hand in hand with something you'll hear me say often if you've been following us on previous podcasts, or if you go back and listen to a lot of them. We talk about a lot of how-tos and why you do things, and we provide a whole lot of educational material on this channel, which is great. But in the end, if you don't do anything except absorb the information, it's really not going to do you much good. In order to go out and achieve the level of success you're after, to get that income level, to attain that time freedom, to kind of level up your lifestyle, if that's what you're after, it requires you to take action. And it's that idea of taking action, actually getting things done, is where this concept of the gift of good enough comes into play. And this is definitely something I've experienced in my own life. So growing up, my dad was very much a perfectionist. He was very detail oriented. He was very much about doing things right the first time, making sure you cross all your T's, dot all your I's, no matter what it was. It had to be done to almost perfection. And what that ended up doing for me is it drove a level of perfectionism as well in everything that I did. So when it came time to do things, if I felt that I wasn't going to be able to do it perfectly, I would procrastinate mainly. I mean, this is a big key when it comes to procrastination, right? Is that idea that you have to do things absolutely perfectly. Well, if you feel like you can't do things perfectly, you're going to put it off until the point in time where you feel like you can do it perfectly, right? And that procrastination can take anywhere from hours to days to weeks, months, years before you go after doing the things you really want to do. And this can apply, obviously, to your network marketing business as well. A lot of people, and I was one of those early on, when I joined my first network marketing company, it was a health and wellness company. And they had a lot of product available. And being the perfectionist that I was, I felt like I had to know everything there was to know about the company before I'd be able to present it to someone else, because I felt like I had to be able to answer any questions that would come up, right? So whether it was questions about the company itself, the products the company provided, the compensation plan, the business building system that was being used, I felt like I had to know it inside out before I could go out and start presenting the business opportunity or even the products to anyone. So, what I found myself doing was spending a lot of time getting ready to get ready. And by that, I mean, I would spend a lot of time reading through materials, trying to get myself to that level of knowledge I felt I needed to have. I would spend a bunch of time going to meetings and just listening, not really taking an active part in a leadership role. And by that, I mean, I wasn't bringing other people to the meetings. I wasn't really contributing anything of value to those meetings other than being another warm body in the seat and kind of contributing to the excitement and, kind of the social proof of having a bunch of people in the room. But I wasn't helping grow the business. I wasn't helping the sales organization that I was a part of. I certainly wasn't helping the network marketing company. And worst of all, I really wasn't helping myself because I wasn't actually doing anything productive. We talk about that the concept of CCBBA, consistent, correct business building activity. And I may have been doing consistent activity, which was learning the materials and going through and spending time, quote unquote, working, but they weren't the correct activities. And they really had nothing to do with actually business building, right? Because if you've listened to previous podcasts and you can go search out different topics, we always talk about the fact of leveraging the materials that you have available to you and not becoming a product expert, not becoming a compensation plan expert. There's all sorts of materials you can refer people to for that. The main task is to work on building your business and creating the duplication that will allow you to identify and work with leaders in your business to do the same, right? But my procrastination mode that I was in, because of my perfectionism, I didn't do anything for a really, really long time. And after a while, through different things that I read, listening to different mentors like Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins, some of the other people engaged in the network marketing industry that I listened to, I finally got to the point, and I can't even tell you exactly what it is that flipped the trigger for me, but it got to the point of, you know what, you have to be at a place where it's like, it's good enough. I can start from here and then improve as I go forward. You don't have to start from the place of perfection. You want to get started and continually improve as you go along. So I ended up calling that the gift of good enough. And it was kind of my antidote to that perfectionism that I had. And that's not to say I totally did away with it, or you don't want to give it your best effort and you're just going to kind of, throw slop out there and do just whatever just to get going. You want to take positive, practical action in the right direction that you want to go. You just don't have to have everything perfect. I've heard it described as eagles learning how to fly, right? The mama eagle will take the little babies and she'll kind of like kick them out of the nest before they're like ready to go themselves. They don't just take off from the nest and fly. It's kind of like they get kicked out and they learn how to fly on the way down, right? They take that first step, which is getting out of the nest, and then they figure out the rest on the fly, so to speak. And I don't know, maybe that's where that phrase "on the fly" comes from, is you get kicked out of the nest and you figure out how to fly on the way down. So that's really what's the basis behind the idea of the gift of good enough. And again, it's really to help inspire you to take action and to start moving. Start your business going. If you haven't engaged with a particular network marketing company yet, maybe that's your first step. Or maybe you've joined a network marketing company, you have a distributorship, but you haven't gone out and started presenting the business opportunity to people. That's where you want to look into our music to the ears message, learn what it is you want to say to people to kind of start that winnowing process of finding out who's really interested in the opportunity and who's not. It's kind of that attraction marketing concept, right? You're trying to attract like-minded people to you, attract people who are looking for the same types of goals that you are in terms of increasing their income, getting that time freedom, improving their lifestyle. Birds of a feather flock together. Apparently I have a bird theme going on here with the gift of good enough too. That was not planned, but I think you probably understand the point I'm trying to make here. You have to start taking action. Nothing happens before you start moving. And it's super important to actually start moving, whether you feel like you've got it down 100% or not, because there is something called the law of inertia. And I know I've talked about this in the past. I don't remember exactly the context that it was in, but the law of inertia basically says a body at rest will tend to stay at rest until a force is exerted upon it to get it moving. So it takes a lot more energy to get a body starting to move than it does to keep it in motion. Just like a body in motion will tend to stay in motion until pressure is exerted to stop it or perhaps redirect it. Now, the way I've phrased that before is, to fight that law of inertia, just get started. It is the first step is always the hardest, that effort it takes to just get moving. And in the context of the gift of good enough, you start moving in a direction. And if you find it's not quite exactly right, you can then adjust. It's easier to change direction once you're already in motion than it is to actually get started. So once you start the ball rolling, so to speak, it's easier to redirect it once it's moving. It kind of it takes me back to when I was initially learning to drive. My driving instructor in the classroom talked about the fact that when the car is rolling, it's easier on the tires to turn when the wheels are rolling, when the car is moving, than it is to turn the steering wheel when the tires are stationary on the ground. If you think about it, if your car is totally parked, those tires are just sitting on the ground. And if you start turning the wheel back and forth to turn the tires are just kind of grinding on the pavement because they're not moving. But if the vehicle's in motion and the tires are turning, when you turn that steering wheel, it turns the tires. It allows them to change direction that much easier, puts less stress on the rubber of the tires themselves while it's in motion, right? So same concept. And this is really what I'm trying to drive home with this idea of the gift of good enough. Give yourself the gift of good enough. Call it an early Christmas present. I don't know how many days we are away from Christmas, but if you've been paying any attention to the news at all, maybe you've heard some of the things I have. There's a lot of folks out there encouraging people to start their Christmas shopping now. They seem to think there's going to be some supply chain issues or whatever. Lead times on shipping seem to be extending. So they're trying to caution people that, hey, yeah, it may only be September, but you may want to start your Christmas shopping now to make sure you get all the items you want in time for Christmas come December 25th. So I'm just going to kind of piggyback on that messaging that's being put out there and say, give yourself an early Christmas present this year and give yourself the gift of good enough. Get it to a point that's workable. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to get going and get started. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know that I can sum it up any better than that. And I certainly don't want to beat a dead horse here and keep repeating it. If you miss something or doesn't make sense, of course, you can always rewind this video or podcast later on, listen to it again, and hopefully catch up the points. Or once again, if you do have any questions, comments, anything, drop it in the chat. Contact us on our website, themlm.net. Any way you want to get in touch with us, we always will try to respond to that. All right, so we will call that a wrap for today's podcast. And I did earlier on say I had a special announcement for you. And I don't know if special is the exact right term, but I didn't know how else to phrase it. But if you've been following along with this podcast for any length of time, you know Mr. Rob Coody is the originator of this podcast. He spent quite a bit of time, several months, I don't remember exactly how long, doing this podcast solo, and then invited me to join him as his co-host because it felt it would bring another dynamic to it, make it a little bit more entertaining. Listening to one person kind of drone on after a while, it's first of all, it's difficult to do as the speaker when you don't have some interpersonal interaction. And I think as a listener also, a little bit of variety makes it more entertaining, more interesting. And then, of course, if you've been listening to Rob and I together, every once in a while we play off each other while we agree on a lot of the fundamentals when it comes to the network marketing industry. There are some things where we don't necessarily see eye to eye. We've had different experiences. We've come through in kind of a different time frame and those types of things. So it makes it a little bit more exciting. And it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege for me to be here co-hosting with Rob. But unfortunately, if you were with us for our podcast last week, and then of course today, I think you've probably noticed the glaring omission of Rob not being here. Well, the reason for that is, unfortunately, Rob had some health challenges he had to deal with last week. And what it culminated in was finding out he had a little heart issue that required surgery. So he did have heart surgery last Thursday. That all went as well as it possibly could. He is in recovery now and doing well. But my understanding is this is going to be a rather lengthy recovery process for him. So we don't know exactly how long it's going to be before Rob can come back and rejoin the podcast. So for that reason, we are putting the podcast on hiatus until further notice. So we're going to take a little time out, take a break. We won't be doing this daily podcast anymore at 11 a.m. Eastern time as we have been. My recommendation to you would be that obviously today was podcast number 258. So that means there's 257 other episodes out there. And on top of that, there are 70 some odd Freelance Friday episodes available as well. if you haven't been tracking with us all along, go back and listen to some of those other podcasts. There's a lot of information that we pack into those. Each topic is very relevant to your network marketing business, except maybe the Freelance Friday episode. Some of those can can go pretty far off the rails depending on what we end up talking about. But there is a wealth of information out there. While we wish we could continue, we did talk about me continuing on in a solo capacity for a while. But quite honestly, as I mentioned, just having one presenter on the podcast, since we've had the co-host concept going for a while, we feel like that would be taking a step backwards and would not be delivering the best material to you that we possibly can. So rather than doing things half-baked and not as well as we'd like, we're just going to take a break. We're going to put the podcast on hiatus until Rob is feeling back up to snuff and we can get him back on the air here and joining us. And of course, we will be happy to communicate with you in whatever ways possible. If you do want to contact us or send well wishes to Rob, feel free to drop a comment here. Otherwise, feel free to contact us again through the website. TheMLMsolution.net is probably the best way to get in touch and allow us to track the incoming communications and get back to you in a timely manner. So if you are so inclined, I know Rob would very much appreciate prayers for a quick, speedy, and full recovery, positive thoughts, healing light, whatever your faith-based system is, or if you just want to give him a thumbs up just to encourage him, I know he would really appreciate that. But as I said, he's in recovery. He's doing as well as he can. It's one of those things that's going to take a while to get him back to 100% and have him fully on his feet. So with that said, we're going to call it a day. And again, I appreciate you all for being here, for joining us, for the communication that you've had with us, the encouragement. We appreciate all that. And we will look forward to seeing you here again soon with the MLM Solution. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. Download our podcast on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, and other podcast platforms. Visit our website at www.themlmsolution.net for additional important information, show details, and past shows. Follow us on Parler, Rumble, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Please hit the like button, the subscribe button, or the get notified button while visiting our other social media platforms.